Hey everybody, welcome back to Unashamed Podcast. This is episode 2. We'll be talking about why we need God. We talk a lot about, the story of Jesus and who God is, but we never really talk about why we really need him. Why does something that happened 2,000 years ago really apply to us today? So we'll be talking about that today. So let's get into it.
I think if we want to dig into the topic of why we need God, we need to really have a firm understanding of why God created us in the first place.
Yeah.
And in the first podcast, we talked about how God made mankind in his image. And so when Jesus came, it wasn't simply for animals, but it was for mankind. It was for our salvation so that we can be reconciled to God. And so when we talk about that, we need to understand that God has made us in his image to be his bearers of light and image bearers, and to go out into the world and fulfill his purposes that he's given to us.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes when we think about, Adam and Eve getting kicked out of the garden, we're often like, oh, they don't get to experience the garden anymore. They don't get to experience the animals. But the real punch there is the fact that their relationship with God is now broken. And it's an awesome image that they used to walk in the cool of day with God himself in all of his glory, just being able to spend time with him and fellowship with him. And now they don't get to have that anymore. And we see in our world today, the results of our broken relationship with God. I've heard it talked about before that we have our vertical relationship, which is with God, and we have our horizontal relationships, which is with each other. And the fact of the matter is, if our vertical relationship isn't in line and isn't good, then our horizontal relationships will never be good. And I think that we have to make sure that we fix that relationship with God, because it really does damage our relationships with each other. And I think that's a big part of why we need God, because he is the giver of all good things. And he is the giver of all good blessings. And it's not like we're treating him like a Walmart where we want to go get all the stuff that we want.
Right.
But it's just the fact of the matter is, when you have a good relationship with God, you become blessed in your other relationships. And we can't sit here and act like relationships aren't broken in this world. You look at families, you look at divorce rates, and even just friendships. How many of you guys have really had long-lasting friendships that don't result in some big blow up? And a lot of that is a result of our individual relationships with God being broken.
It's made clear to us that without God we fall apart. And I think a prime example of that is just before man chose to rebel, and just before man chose that they would decide what is good and evil in their own sight, we had that relationship with God. We had all that we needed. We didn't need to go anywhere else to find that fulfillment, but we had that in God. But after that, we could see how relationships were broken. The very first people born, Cain and Abel, to mankind, it ends in a disastrous murder of his brother. And that's something that you don't expect to see at the beginning of a book. But that's really what happens when man decides that we don't need God. We can do this by ourselves.
Yeah, and without God, we really have no basis for what is good and bad. Who told us that murder is wrong? Who told us that stealing is wrong? Now, I'm not saying that murder is not wrong. Please don't take me wrong there. But what I am saying is that, even if you look at countries like the United States, their founders based the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution on biblical principles, because they realized that God in the Bible laid out pretty much the blueprint for human flourishing. If you look at the 10 Commandments, imagine what a society like here in South Africa would be like if we all adhered to the 10 Commandments. There would be no coveting, there would be no stealing, there would be no adultery, sex-related diseases would just disappear. It's insane that he lays out 10 simple, well, not really simple. Simple to understand, but not simple to follow. 10 simple rules to basically have a society be the best it could possibly be. And us as individuals, we also have to decide, what's our basis for right and wrong? What makes you decide that something is right while I decide that it's wrong? If you don't have a basis, a foundation for that, it's just going to be subjective.
Yeah.
And we're all just going to be running around feeling in the dark, trying to figure out a way out and the right way to go, when God kind of just shines a light on that and says, look, this is what is good, this is what is bad. And it was defined by the creator of the universe, so you best believe he's got a good opinion on it. I mean, really, the whole lead up, the build up to the New Testament when we meet Jesus is how do we get back to God? How do we get back to that perfect relationship that Adam and Eve had with God in the Garden of Eden? And I mean, Jesus just straight up tells us in the Gospels, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me.
So true.
And so we can't sit around trying to figure out ways to get to God when it's laid out in Scripture. Jesus is the only way. And that's why we talk about the gospel so much. That's why we drill it down, because the only way back to God is through Jesus. In Hebrews, it tells us that Jesus is now the perfect mediator for us, between us and God. And he's constantly praying for us and helping us communicate with God in our relationships with God, and then, of course, in our relationships with others. And so the hope really is that Jesus can fix our relationships now, and the hope is that once and for all, when Jesus comes back, our relationship with God will be fixed forever, perfectly. We will be glorified, and we will walk with him as he walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. And I mean, that's our hope. That's our perfect restoration, ultimate restoration in the end, of being able to have that relationship back with God in a perfect society with relationships with others.
And the awesome thing is not just that, but Jesus, though we are not promised that we're not going to have troubles in this world, he says that he has overcome this world. And so why we need Jesus in this world, and not just for our eternal future, is because he helps us to make sense of the hurt and the pain. And he helps us to see how he uses those things for good, to his glory, and ultimately for our good at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, he blesses us in our relationships when we are trying to do it in a God-honoring way. I mean, that's our whole purpose here on earth, right, is to give God the glory and to bring glory to his name here on earth and advance his kingdom. And so why do we need God? Frankly, we can't do anything without God. Our relationships are broken. We are broken. We screw everything up, to be honest, if we're just left by ourselves. So we really need God because he's the creator of all things. He knows how it works, and he wants to help us become the people that he made us to be and to glorify him in the way we were supposed to.
So yeah, that's why we need God. And of course it goes so much deeper than that. We're just kind of laying the foundation for you. And we'll cover that in future episodes.
Yeah, and if you want to try to make your relationship right with God today and start today, which we recommend you do, guys, we don't know how much time each of us have. And if you really want to get started today, just read the Bible. I would recommend starting, like we said last episode, in John, in the Gospels, to really read about Jesus and who he is and what he came to do. And just pray. And we sometimes think of God as this distant, far-off being that we can't talk to. But really just talk to him and tell him, what you're really feeling, what you really think about him. It's not a sin to tell him that you don't feel like he's there, or that you don't feel like he's real. I mean, I've had people that have told me, I'm going to give God a chance tonight and see if he comes through. And every single one of them end up saved by the end of that night, because God always comes through. And you can really just talk to him. He's there. He wants to hear from you. He's a good father. And so we just, we're praying for you guys. We hope that if you guys have any questions, if you have our numbers, you'll contact us. We'll be happy to talk to you about it. So, we'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one.